couple of years ago, I had this massive realization as a leader. I realized that I needed to change how I lead. Now, don't get me wrong, our team was happy, our initiatives were thriving, everything was growing, things were looking great, but I was starting to wonder if all of that was dependent on me in an unhealthy way. And I knew that if that was the case, that wasn't going to be sustainable. I may have helped get us where we were, but I would quickly become the problem if I didn't make some serious changes. For one thing, I was tired. I had 3 kids at the time. I had just spent an enormous amount of energy leading our team through the very challenging COVID pandemic. And if you were a leader during that time, man, you know how hard that was. It was just years of getting the absolute snot beaten out of you. And then on the home front, my wife's father passed unexpectedly. We were wrestling with multiple consecutive miscarriages, and I was wrapping up 3 hard years of grad school throughout all of this. I was tired. I was just beaten up. I just felt like a shell of myself by the end of all that. And I knew that the dreams that we had for the future were not reachable with my current leadership know-how. I had to do something about it because I was feeling stuck. The solution for so long was that I could just make things happen. I could work harder, I could research more, I could find ways to get the job done to move things forward. But that wasn't going to work this time. I wasn't the solution. I was the problem. I needed to become a better leader. So I started reading everything I could get my hands on. And when my 4th child was born, I remember I read something like 12 books in just a couple of weeks while I was on paternity leave, because I was desperate to crack the code on the next phase of my leadership journey. And with all of that research and reading and time spent trying to uncover that, there were 3 books that stand out during that learning season. And each book delivered a very powerful leadership lesson that I desperately needed. And I know that many of you are feeling tired and stuck, and you feel like you're in need of some kind of leadership remodel. Let me tell you, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Let's talk about lesson number 1. For years, I was asking the wrong questions as a leader. Questions like, how do I do this? How do I fix this? How do I grow this? How do I accomplish this? How? And I. But then I read this book that changed my thinking. It's called Who, Not How. And this is lesson number 1. I understood the importance of delegation, but not like this. This one's different. It's more than a shift in behavior. It's a shift in mindset. I stopped thinking how, and I started thinking who. Who can do this? Who can fix this? Who can grow this? Who can make this happen? Who? I'm telling you, it changed everything. Over the past year, I've been putting this into practice more and more, and I've learned that it's bigger than just delegation. It's like delegation on steroids. Not only have I been able to revolutionize how I go about things, but I've seen my team grow. It's also allowed me to be the who for other people. I've been able to lean into initiatives that I've been wanting to develop for years. It's wonderful. It reminds me of an old leadership maxim. I think it was Harry Truman who said something along the lines of how it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. That's the power of who, not how. It unlocks a completely different growth mindset. I'm not going to get into all of the ins and outs of all the different tactics within the book, but the principle is so key. And so I would encourage you to pick up the book, go through it. It's a critical piece of the leadership puzzle, and it helped me tremendously when I really needed it. Who, not how. That's lesson number 1. Let's go to lesson number 2. One of the rabbit holes that I went down in my leadership research a couple of years ago was the topic of scaling. I felt like I knew how to grow things, but I didn't know how to scale things. And there's a difference. Scaling differs from growth in that it focuses more on structure and systems and processes and dynamics that support healthy growth and increase overall productivity. One of the books that I found really helpful during this time was a book called Traction. And this book right here, in a season when I felt like things were a little out of control and just unclear, this book gave me the leadership confidence to respond in a healthy way. Here are the 2 biggest scaling practices that I took away from this book. The first one is to keep a scorecard, and the second one is to rethink structure annually. Let's talk about both. First, a scorecard. I've talked about this before, but this is a really, really important thing to understand. There's this old business maxim that says anything that is measured and watched improves. It's also been said that what gets measured gets done. A scorecard is your measuring device. You can put any metrics you want on it. It's designed to track what's important to you. It helps you see how well you're doing, and it gives you immediate feedback on areas that might need attention. I used to go off what I saw or how I felt, but I learned that you can't do that. What you see and how you feel aren't accurate. Now I have multiple scorecards. I track numbers and I track stats, but one of my favorite scorecards is my personal journal. And I think this has got to be like the second or third since I've started keeping a scorecard that I've gone through, journals that I've gone through. Every day I document what I'm seeing. I'm documenting what I think and what I'm feeling. And I write numbers and I write what I'm wrestling with and I write what happened that day and pretty much anything on my mind. And I always note the date and the time. I even note the weather that day of my entry because who knows, it might come in handy one day. Not only do I find it just incredibly therapeutic, but it's also allowed me to look back and study where I used to be and compare it where I am now. And that just puts so many things into perspective because we get lost in the day-to-day and the week-to-week. And sometimes we lose sight of the greater picture. More on that in just a minute. Another scorecard that I encourage you to have is a physical calendar. I have liked I think it's a Clever Fox. This is a great one. I think they make a whole bunch. Sometimes I've had calendars that are on my wall, like in my office or something, and where I can see everything laid out. And, we tend to think in terms of days and weeks, but we also need to keep track of the big picture. There's just something about spreading a calendar open, looking at a whole month or an entire year at a time that is so helpful. Keeping a scorecard, whether it's statistics or results or numbers or calendar or journal, has dramatically improved my life in leadership. It lets you keep a pulse on things and predict and plan what's around the corner. It's just a critical practice in scaling. I can't believe that I didn't start it earlier. But that's the first practice in scaling. The second one is to rethink structure annually. Essentially, with each season of growth, the systems, roles, strategies that got you the growth that you were experiencing, those things are going to start to expire. And they'll likely become the same systems and roles and strategies that will keep you from your next season of growth. I'm convinced now more than ever that some kind of restructuring should take place annually. My team, in fact, has come to expect this. Every year, I schedule one-on-one meetings with my team, and I do that just to get a sense of what's going on. Like, where's everyone at? How are they feeling? How do they like their role? What are they seeing and feeling within the team and the organization? And I walk away every time with just way better information of what's going on. And then I can rethink everything, all of our systems and individual roles, and we can feel this complete freedom to pivot in any way that we need to for the next season. Now, I know that throwing around the restructuring word in some organizations can create anxiety and fear in people. People start wondering if their job is secure and all that. But I think that's because a lot of organizations don't restructure enough, or they don't restructure in a healthy way. So when it happens, people freak out. But if you communicate it as a natural annual process just to keep things healthy and growing, then I think your people are actually going to understand and come to appreciate it. When I think about this whole restructuring thing, it reminds me of a couple of years ago when I took on a bet that I could keep plants alive in my office for an entire year. Now, I know nothing about plants, and I wouldn't say I'm a plant person. But I purchased 3 different kinds of plants, again, that I knew nothing about, just thought they looked nice. And so far, I'm proud to say that they've all survived for 2 years now. I'm very proud of that. However, just recently, I started noticing that they weren't looking so good. And I remember my brother, who's really into plants, really good with them, mentioned that they need to be repotted with new soil every now and then. And it got me thinking, it's interesting how the plant can survive with water and sunlight and all of that. But as it grows, it eventually needs a complete restructuring to survive. New pot, new soil, new life. And it works the same way in leadership, doesn't it? Now, I understand that this can feel like a lot of work, but if you really care about your team or your business or your organization, you need to restructure things regularly to keep things healthy. This could be systems that don't work anymore. It could be roles that need to be redefined. It could be organizational charts that need to be rethought, meetings that are no longer needed. You get the idea. you're just rethinking everything for a new season. What do we need to do? What do we need to look like for the next season of growth? And remember, this is why you have a scorecard. Your scorecard informs how you restructure. But there's something else that keeps leaders stuck. It's what I went through a couple of years ago, and it's what you might be going through right now. It has everything to do with seasons of leadership. One of the books that I read that really reinforced this lesson for me was a book called Shoe Dog. And it's Phil Knight's memoir detailing the founding and early years of Nike, from selling shoes out of a car trunk with a $50 loan to becoming a global brand that we all know today. The book chronicles all of the risks and the setbacks and the triumphs of the journey building Nike. And, I was struck by just how hard a road it was for Phil Knight to realize the Nike brand that we all know today. As it goes with any success story, there were some really dark and scary seasons where Nike could have never been realized, where Phil Knight might have lost everything. In the book, Phil Knight talks about the many terrifying risks that he had to encounter along the way. He had crushing setbacks, the ruthless competition, the countless doubters and haters. It was not an easy road. One of the funniest parts of the book to me was reading how the famous Nike swoosh, the logo, was created. And it was created by a graphic design student at Portland State University for like $35. And Phil Knight was initially just disappointed with it. I think he said, I don't love it, but it'll grow on me. And this is why I love reading books like this, because it puts things into perspective. I think a lot of people can get hung up on the small things or the short little seasons and lose sight of the greater picture. People often think success stories are fast and predictable, and it almost never works out like that. It's almost always slow and uncertain and volatile and disillusioning. There's constant ups and downs, but over time, if you stay in the game long enough, you get to see what all of the seasons produce as a whole. And sadly, a lot of leaders jump ship in the dead of winter and they never get to see the fruit of spring. It's kind of like the stock market, right? The wisest investors understand that there are crazy highs and crazy lows, but they don't focus on those seasons. They focus on the long term. Over time, it grows. Seasons come, seasons go. Leadership is all about navigating the different seasons and focusing on the bigger picture. You may be in a hard season right now, but don't throw in the towel. At the end of every episode, I say, keep fighting the good fight. And it's not original to me, but I've certainly adopted it as my personal motto. It comes from one of my historical heroes, the Apostle Paul from the 1st century AD. Paul lived a hard life, but a meaningful life. And there's a letter that he wrote to a young man named Timothy. And he said, don't be afraid of suffering. Work at telling others the good news and fully carry out the ministry God has given you. As for me, my life has already been poured out as an offering to God. The time of my death is near. And I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. And I have remained faithful. And that's the charge I want to leave you with today. We could talk about skills and practices. Those things are important. But the most powerful leadership lesson of all is simply to never give up. Even in the hard seasons, keep fighting the good fight. Let me know in the comments what that looks like for you right now. Maybe type, keep fighting the good fight. And then I'll know that you're in a hard season, but you know what? You're still committed. And I respect that. And I'm cheering you on. And look, if you found value in this episode, would you consider sharing it with someone else that you think it might serve? That would just mean the world to me. And I also hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing here on YouTube. Or if you're listening via podcast, rating and reviewing is such a simple way to show your support. I really appreciate you being an active part of this community. I never take it for granted. I hope this episode served you, and I'll see you again real soon. And hey, if you like this episode, I think you're going to really like this episode right here, where we talk about 3 traits that all great leaders have. We talk about what they are, why they matter, how you can cultivate them in your own life and leadership. And maybe you have one or more of these leadership traits, maybe not. But in any case, all 3 of these traits can be developed, and that's what matters. It's a very important episode, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. I'll see you over there.